with us. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be with you on this morning, and I'm grateful that Bishop has given me the assignment to facilitate this discussion because we want to always make sure that we are giving the people that are connected to the Inspiring Temple of Praise Church the things that we need to be able to be prosperous even during times like these. And I'm going to be joined this morning by two amazing individuals. First and foremost, we have Miss Misty Wilder, who is here with us this morning. She is a mental health professional, and I will give her the opportunity to introduce herself. And then secondly, we have Mr. Roderick Miles, who is representing Commissioner Roy Brooks's office, the Office of County Commissioner, Tarrant County Precinct 1, and he's going to be here to be able to give us the civic perspective. And so I'm going to yield, and I'm going to do my best to simply facilitate the discussion here this morning and not certainly get on my soapbox, but I'm going to let these two individuals share with us this morning from their particular expertise. But first and foremost, I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with ladies first. I'm going to allow Misty to introduce herself and just share a few opening comments with us.
Good morning. I am Misty Wilder, and I am the Director of Healthy Start at UNT Health Science Center. And thank you for allowing me this opportunity to be a part of this discussion as we discuss the mental health effects of COVID-19 and some of the violence that is in the Black community. And so what we do know is that Black or African Americans make up about 13% of the population in the United States. But 16% of those individuals have been exposed or diagnosed with some type of mental health disorder. And so what we do know is that we are not as great a population, but we are making up a large percentage of those that have been diagnosed. And I'm not speaking of those that are not diagnosed or self-diagnosed, but those who actually have a diagnosis of mental health. And so we see with COVID-19 that it has increased, bringing out some mental health effects, especially those who are introvert or extroverts. And so they want to be more social, want to be more out, and those who have high anxiety. So when we use words like shelter in place, isolation, that can trigger, those are trigger words for those that are suffering with mental health, because we know that language does matter. And so when we say things like we need to social distance, and from a public health professional, we would like to say we need to be physically distancing and not social distancing, because when we talk about social, you want to be social, you just don't want to be close up. So those type of things, so the language that we use also has an effect. And we also know that most people in Black communities are already living in poverty, and so with the loss of jobs, furloughing, and things like that, and we live in food deserts. What most Black communities have a food desert, and then we add on the loss of insecure food sources and things like that, add on to our mental effect, and has had a toll on our mental effects during the COVID-19.
Awesome. Before I yield to Mr. Miles, if you will give us those statistics again. You said we make up about 13% of the population, but how much of our community is affected by mental illness?
16%.
16%. 13% of the population, yes, 16% of our community has been diagnosed as having some form of mental illness. Thank you so much. We'll come back to you in just a second, Misty. I have here to my left, your right, Mr. Roderick Miles, and I'll give him an opportunity to introduce himself and share a few opening comments with us as well.
Thank you, Minister Daryl. Pastor Daryl, appreciate the opportunity to come out. I want to give a special word of thanks to Bishop Jordan. You know that Commissioner Brooks loves you dearly. We love the ITOP family and this ministry. I am here on behalf of Commissioner Brooks. I represent Commissioner Brooks' office of Precinct 1, Tarrant County, and our precinct encapsulates the majority of the African American community in Tarrant County. So it's very important for us to be here and to share some information and some data with you from Tarrant County so that people are educated and they know what's going on in their communities and how to respond and how to react. So I pulled up our county website because I want to give you some data. Absolutely. I don't want to give you conjecture. I want to give you data. So this information was uploaded. It is current as of Saturday, May the 16th. The total number of positive cases in Tarrant County is 4,350. New cases as of Saturday, May the 16th, is 84. The community spread level is substantial. Let me say that again. The community spread level is substantial. The total number of deaths as of Saturday, May the 16th, is 121, and there have been 1,470 people who've recovered from COVID-19. It is important that I highlight that one fact, that community spread level is substantial. What does that mean? How do we interpret that? We interpret that to mean that although our governor, in his infinite wisdom, has opened the state of Texas, for those in our communities, the levels are substantial, meaning it's not going away, and it's not going away anytime soon. And although these businesses are open, there is still a substantial number of people who are being exposed and infected with COVID-19. There's another statistic that I wanted to give you, and that is mortality statistics. And here it is: death by race and ethnicity. In the African American community, we have 20%, we count 26% of the deaths from COVID-19. Asian and Pacific American are 2%. American Indians, 1%. Hispanic, 24%. Caucasian, 46%. Other, 0%, not reported, 0%. Now let me be clear with these numbers. These are the numbers of cases that have been reported.
Right.
The number of cases that have been reported. It does not factor in or take into account those who have been unreported and undiagnosed because of the lack of testing. So you may have very well, these numbers can be inflated. As more people are tested, as we open up more testing centers and testing sites, these numbers are going to increase by virtue of the fact more people are able to get tested.
Let me ask this question, Mr. Miles, because you've given us statistics, and it pretty much shows that communities of color are more susceptible to COVID-19. And I think that this is important because our county judge has not been as excited about getting testing centers in communities of color. However, there has been a new center testing site that's opened up on the southeast side of Fort Worth, which is right in the heart of a community of color. Tell us how that ended up happening.
That ended up happening, I'm glad you asked the question, because Commissioner Brooks advocated for our communities to have a testing center. And and you have to understand how do I want to put it, the delicacy of politics.
Sure.
And the volatility of politics, right? Commissioner Brooks always says, the first thing you need to learn in county government is how to count to 3. And what that means is it takes 3 votes to pass anything at Commissioner's Court. And you've got to be able to get those 3 votes to get anything moved. And so for those of you who may have tuned in to Commissioner's Court online, you've seen the last couple of weeks, Commissioner Brooks and Judge Whitley have been kind of testy with one another. Because I believe, and that's an I statement, I believe because the communities that the other commissioners who don't reflect the demographic that we reflect don't have the same level of exposure or death as related to COVID-19 or those underlying health conditions, they don't see the urgency of having mass testing, especially in their communities, right? And it stands to reason. If it's not affecting you directly in an adverse manner, then you aren't motivated or you don't have a sense of urgency to make things happen. Well, in our case, Commissioner recognizes that our communities have most of the underlying health issues that are related to COVID-19 deaths, right? Diabetes, hypertension, high blood pressure, All of those things are what we suffer from, right? And so at Commissioner's Court, Commissioner advocated and fussed, in my opinion, quite colorfully, and appealed to the Commissioner's Court that we needed testing in our community, that it was unacceptable how we are dragging our feet and moving so slowly to get the testing needed for people to have a chance to live and to recover from COVID-19. And so there was a lot of argument and debating going on, but at the end of the day, Commissioner went around to all of the commissioners individually, stated his case, and was able to advocate and get a testing center in Southeast Fort Worth.
That is awesome, and we're certainly grateful to Commissioner Brooks for standing on the wall, if you will, and standing for communities of color. So let me just ask this question, then I'm going to go back to Misty real quick. So would you say that it is important to have individuals that reflect your beliefs, that reflect your heritage and your culture in positions of power?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to that shortly. Misty, I want to come back to you because Bishop just talked about finding balance in imbalance. And I want you, from the mental health perspective, to be able to share with us, how do we get to a place of balance? Because we're hearing words like shelter in place, social distancing, and these things, and we understand that, if I understood you correctly, those could potentially be trigger words for some people who are already suffering from mental illness, whether they know it or not. So how do we, in the face of what we're dealing with, how do we maintain balance? Being in our homes, not being able to go to our jobs, not being able to send our kids to school, having to teach our kids at home. How do we find that place of balance?
And first, in order for us to find that balance, is that we have to admit, I'm not okay. And so it's hard for most people of color to say, hey, I'm struggling over here. Hey, I'm not okay. I'm not doing okay. You know, and so when we first admit that, and then there are things that we could do. We encourage people to go outside. You may not be able to walk far, but at least open the door, get the sunlight, let that vitamin D hit our skin, and that can refresh us. And then we need to check on one another. Make sure that we're calling our family members and saying, hey, are you okay? Hey, just checking in, or just saying, hey, I was thinking about you. Because we think about people a lot. We don't see each other, but you're like, I wonder how so-and-so is doing. Pick up the phone and call them. And then use Zoom to schedule something. Say, hey, everybody, let's just get on Zoom. Get your family members, send out the link and say, hey, let's get on Zoom and let's just talk and chat. No structure, just say, hey, what's going on? Play some music in the background. Get up, turn your radio on, and just play some music. Turn the TV off. Get off of social media. Get off trying to say, okay, what's the latest data? What is this? Sometimes we just got to step away from it all and just say, okay, I'm not going to look at it today. I don't want to know how many deaths there are today, what's going on. I just want to just sit here and relax. Read a book. Read something, relax, and just take time for yourself and just take it all in. And most importantly, just say, okay, I'm not okay right now. And reach out to other friends and say, hey, sis, hey, bro, I'm struggling. And just talk and spend time. We know that our sleep pattern is off. I know for mine, I'm going to bed later. I'm staying up watching. Sometimes I just watch TV just some ratchet TV and just be like, okay, I'm just going to watch The Housewives right now, and watch some ratchet TV, just to take my mind. So those are the type of things that we can do, so that we can find balance and then come back to it the next day, or step away for a couple of hours and then go back to it. But if we are steady consuming ourselves, especially when we know that the testing sites are few. So just think about, I'm already suffering from some type of underlying condition. And for me to hear that in my community there is no testing site, so you start to wonder, like, what if I get it? What happens? And so all that takes a mental effect on you. So not focusing on that. Not focusing on, okay, if I go, can I afford a testing? So just because we have testing in our community, can we afford it? So if I go over there and I say, I don't have insurance. So how am I going to pay for it? So that adds another stress level to me. So a lot of times we need to make sure that we're having the correct information, because people are saying, well, free testing over there, but we've called some centers and it's $75, and people are like, I don't have $75, so that adds another stress. So just making sure that you step away for a moment and not just focus on what could happen to me, but living in the moment of right now. This is where I am right now, and living in that.
Very good. So you're saying that that those Zoom happy hours are a blessing to the soul.
Oh, yes, it
Amen.
will bless your
Zoom
life.
happy hours are a blessing to the soul. That is not an official statement by the Inspiring Temple of Praise Church. That's just a Darylism. But let Zoom social happy hours minister to you, Mr. Miles.
I wanted to piggyback on something that Misty said and just add some information. The testing sites in Southeast Fort Worth are free for those who do not have insurance. And if you do have insurance, I think you pay the copay. But if you don't have insurance, the testing is free. And how you actually qualify for testing is you can't just go and show up. That's why we're not making the site address available, because if we did, people would just show up and they have not been screened. And we don't want to waste the test and the reagents and things of that nature. So what you need to do is follow the guidelines that the county has laid out, public health, and that is to go to the website covidtesting.tarrantcounty.com, covidtesting.tarrantcounty.com, and you will do a survey or an assessment. They'll ask you a series of questions to confirm whether or not you are eligible to be tested. And so once you complete that survey, they will give you a date and a time in which you can schedule your appointment. And once you receive that date and time, then you will be given the address to the testing site. So that's the process that you need to go through to get tested. And when Misty made the statement about, if you feel a little something, you're like, oh my God, do I have COVID? Well, I went to a funeral Friday, one of my fraternity brothers, and I was out there, and I came home and went to bed that night, and I started coughing a little bit. And the first thing that jumped in my mind said, you shouldn't have went to that funeral. Now COVID trying to get on you. And I had to wrestle in my mind and say, devil, you a lie. I ain't got nothing. Amen. I ain't got nothing but what Jesus promised me. But it's amazing how your mind will play tricks on you. And your body will start to feel different things because your mind is playing those tricks. And you'll be like, oh my Lord, what is going on? Now I'm itching. Do I have a fever? Just all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's real.
And not only that, not only your mind, but you in the store, you don't want to cough because you're scared somebody gonna be like, oh, you got that Rona, so you like, you holding in your cough, you holding in your, so that's stressful. And then you got this mask on, you can't hardly breathe, so all of those things. So it's really traumatizing to us, and that you're already feeling some kind of anxiety. And then you can't do anything because people are so afraid that like, oh, I'm going to get it. Or if I'm around you, I'm going to get it. And so that's why I think we need to focus on the physical distancing and not the social distancing part, because we need each other. We do need to socialize with each other. So that's how we can make it through.
Very good. I'm going to ask one last question about COVID-19, and then I want to transition to the second portion of our discussion. What don't we know? What is it that we're not being told? What is it that we're not processing, we're not in the knowledge of as it relates to COVID-19? Is there anything that either of you feel like there's something that our communities need to know that we've not been told?
Absolutely. A couple of things that the community does not know that you need to know is everybody may or may not be aware that the Texas Supreme Court lifted the stay on evictions. Evictions will go back into effect starting on Tuesday the 19th, I believe. And what the county is doing is we are providing relief funds for families, rental assistance funds for families to get those dollars out of the door quickly so that people can pay their rent. And we're releasing those funds going back until March when COVID-19 hit and people started losing their jobs. So those funds are going to be available. And when the application comes out, it's not going to be a long application asking you 150 questions. It'll be a simple application that you can complete. And we're also working with the Justice of the Peace and the landlords to try to get them to give their tenants a grace period so that they can get these funds and be made whole again. We're also providing funds out of our CARES Act funding that we got from the federal government to nonprofits. There's money that's been earmarked for nonprofits, churches that have nonprofits, organizations, and specifically for those who have been providing services that are directly related to COVID-19. If you've got a food pantry and you've been providing food, we're wanting to know what services you've been providing since March 1st and what is your expected budget through December the 30th. And you can apply for those funds, and I can share that information with you, Daryl, and you, Bishop, so that you can communicate that out to the nonprofits. And then we have money set aside for small businesses. It's not a loan, it's a grant, a small business grant. And Commissioner Brooks has advocated for the small businesses, those who have staff of 10 or less, that they may apply and qualify for some of those dollars. And we're looking anywhere from $7,500 to $10,000 grants to be given to these small businesses like your mom and pop, your barber shops, your beauty salons, where it may be one or two people working in those places. Our restaurants, the soul food restaurants, things of that nature, that could not get qualified for the federal grants, but you can qualify for the county's funds.
That's good. So there are resources available. If you need rental assistance, if you're a small business owner, a nonprofit, there are resources available at the county level that you can tap into. And so we'll get that information. We'll share it on our social media platforms as well as our website. Misty, anything that we need to know that we don't already know from a mental health standpoint?
I'm not sure I wanted to say, can I speak to the
Absolutely.
resources? I think that we also need to find a way in our communities, particularly communities of color, is how to streamline some of the information, because I know for me, we get information after information after information, and sometimes you have to dig through it to find what you want. So if we can find a way to streamline that information, especially about the testing, because I know what we do on a day-to-day basis is we're sending our clients back to their healthcare provider, but some of them don't have a healthcare provider, so some of them utilize the JPS system or things like that. So there's always something. So if we could streamline it to remove all barriers for people of color to access the information and be knowledgeable, because some things we found are not true, and people are just sharing information, and we don't know when to decipher, is this true or if it's not true. So if one source could be, I know it's going to be multiple sources, but find a way to streamline to make sure that the information is accurate and correct.
Awesome. Thank you. And you mentioned JPS, and I said we were going to transition, but Mr. Miles, you can confirm or correct, but we received and we actually shared some information on our social media site about the fact that JPS has the highest number of COVID cases compared to any other hospital in North Texas. Is that in fact true, that we have more cases here in Tarrant County, particularly in JPS Hospital, other than any other hospital in the North Texas area?
I cannot confirm that because I don't have that information and I don't want to speak out of turn.
Sure.
But it would make sense because JPS is the hospital for indigent care and those people who don't have insurance and things of that nature. So it would stand to reason that JPS numbers would be elevated above other hospitals in North Texas because it is a public hospital.
Okay, thank you. And so we're going to transition. We only have a few minutes left, but we want to transition. Bishop Jordan preached a powerful and prophetic message on last Sunday about, it was kind of in response, if you will, to the killings of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. I want to ask both of you, how were you personally affected by the news, the reality of those two individuals losing their lives, one at the hand of law enforcement and the other at the hand of a vigilante, if you will, who, I said I wasn't going to get on my soapbox, but how were you two personally affected by that? And I'm asking that question because you oftentimes speak to us as professionals in your field. But I want you to be able to speak to us about how you as a person were affected by each of those things. And Misty, I'll start with you.
Well, first of all, I have a black son. And so that raising a teenager thinks nothing will happen. That's not going to happen to me. So every time he leaves the house, I'm like trying to tell him, don't do this, having this don't do conversations. Instead of just saying, okay, and constantly reminding him there's just certain things you can't do and certain places that you just have to conduct yourself accordingly, which is sad, that we have to have these conversations. And then as a black female, I was just telling Roderick that I was walking on the Trinity and saw the police come in this little golf cart, but I was on the phone with somebody. I was like, dang, here come the police. Instantly, my stomach began to just hurt. And they were like, well, calm down. You're just walking on the Trinity. But just the sight of seeing, and I'm looking around, I'm like, okay, I don't see nobody else of color on this Trinity right now. And so I'm like, okay, stay on the phone with me until they pass. So the first golf cart of police came, then some came on a dirt bike. I said, dang, here come another set. And they like, Misty, you haven't done anything wrong. I said, but I'm a black woman out here by myself. The only person that know I'm really out here is you because you're on the phone with me. So stay on the phone with me until they pass. So living like that causes stress for me. Even though I've done nothing wrong, just simply walking, just their presence at that point, because it was right after my shooting that I'm like, I tensed up on something that's supposed to be de-stressing me. It's causing me stress while I'm out here walking.
Very good. Mr. Miles?
My heart hurt. My heart aches for our people. There's a thing I learned recently called compassion fatigue, where you're not directly affected, but because things are happening around you, your heart hurts, and you get exhausted.
Absolutely.
You get emotionally exhausted. I'm tired. There was a Facebook post that went around talking about I'm tired. I can't go walking. I can't do this. I can't do that. I'm hurting. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I want to tear up something, if I just be honest.
Yes.
I mean, I see people walking around that don't look like me, who don't have to worry about the things that I have to worry about as a black man. And for someone to say, you're overreacting or I don't get it, that's offensive to me. Because you're devaluing my experience by minimizing what's happening to people that look like me.
Absolutely. Misty, you said your stomach began to hurt. You began to tense up. I can't escape the fact that you're a mental health professional. And even in the face of all of the knowledge, the experience, the expertise that you have, you as an individual black woman, you still worry about your son. You worry about your own safety. So in knowing that, how do we, those of us that are not professionals in the mental health arena, how do we properly respond to things like that happen? Because if you experience that with all of your expertise, those of us that are, let's just say, we have a lack of knowledge as it relates to mental health, then how do we position ourselves? What response is a reasonable response? What should we do in those moments?
Breathe. Because you have to just take a deep breath and you just have to breathe so that you can think clearly. Because to be honest, any wrong move and you can be dead. I mean, so you don't want to be reactive. Right. Just because I saw him, I didn't want to just be like, oh my God, you know what I'm saying? And cause problems that could ultimately end up me being a hashtag. So I had to, the person on the phone was like, calm down, breathe, Misty. Just breathe and just focus on what you're doing. And that's what we have to do. And sometimes we just have to take a moment and we just have to breathe so that we can think rationally and not react to just their presence and then cause some additional problems for us and our families.
Yeah, that's good. If I had to, if I was going to preach that in a sermon, I would entitle it The Power of a Pause. Because there is something that happens when I stop, take a moment, breathe, get my faculties together so that I don't make the wrong move, because the wrong move could be my last move. That's good.
And we can't be afraid of the pause.
Yeah,
so when you preach
yeah.
that, make sure you tell us that
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
okay to pause. We
Yes,
can't be
ma'am.
afraid of it.
Don't be afraid of the pause. Y'all are going to hear that our time. Mr. Miles, what is a reasonable response, particularly even in the context of civic engagement, activism? What is a reasonable response?
Thank you, Daryl. And I would say this, two things I wanted to make sure that I said today. And number one is people will only do what you require them to do. Government does what we require of them. And so if we want to see change, then we have to require them to change. They're not going to change because it's the right thing to do. Right. History has already taught us that. Yes, they'll only change if we require them. And how do you require them? By going to the booth, yes, sir. Voting, making sure that your voice is heard through your ballot. That's how you require them, because elected officials work for you and I.
That's right.
They work for us. They don't work for special interest groups. They don't work for lobbyists. They don't work for different companies. They work for the people. And so when the people get tired, then we'll see change by voting. And the last thing I wanted to share was, as we're telling our young people to physical distance, I'm learning, right? Yeah. Let's make sure that we don't blame the victims for being victims.
That's good. That's good.
Let's not blame our children for being children and wanting to be together and to gather with one another, because we are a social people. That's a part of our culture. It's in our DNA. Yes, and so why are we blaming them for doing something that's innate in them? So let's not blame the victim. Let's listen to them. Yes, and let's respond to the things that they're saying, because they're talking to us. We're just not doing a good job of listening. Yeah. And so we need to listen better. Yeah. And I heard, the last thing I'll say is, I heard a guy say, you're telling children who are in environments where they have pedophiles living in the house. They have people that are coming out of prison and coming back into those houses, and they become prey, and you're asking them to stay in the house with the person that's going to violate them potentially, or the person that's beating them, and you get mad when they're outside. Stop blaming the victim for being a victim. Stop blaming the mama and the granny and the auntie for doing the best they can with a lack of resources. Let's stand with them. Let's not say, I'm here for you. Let's show up and be there with them.
Yes, sir.
And considering that, let me add to both statement that he said, is that oftentimes we want to stop at voting, but we actually need to go a step forward. So once I vote for you and you become in office, I need to hold you accountable.
That's right.
So when you come to my church and you say that you're going to do this and you're going to do that, so you could get my vote, I need that same energy that you had when you was going on the church circuit, telling everybody to vote. Right. And so we need to hold them accountable. So sometimes we just stop at voting. And so, no, when I vote you in and you get in the office, you can't switch up on me. Okay, right. So you have to, I'm going to hold you to the fire of what you said that you was going to do when you were begging for my vote. And then the second thing we know is, speaking of being social, is that we've seen an increase in child abuse and domestic violence. So intimate partner violence has, because we have said stay at home. And so that is why people want to go out, because sometimes maybe going to the grocery store may be the safest place because she just was beat or the child was just violated. So thinking about things like that is that when we're using things of like isolation and shelter in place, and a lot of times we say, well, we're not staying at home, you're safe at home, but for some, that's not the narrative for some. But for some, it is not a safe place at home.
Yeah. Wow, this has been powerful, and our time is out. And we're going to transition and let Bishop come back and close us out. But in 30 seconds or less, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here?
I believe that as a community, we have to come back and be a village. And so and not work in silos. So we know that when the shooting happened with Ahmaud, everybody got out and ran, and we posted and we did those things, which are good. Then the shooting happened on last Sunday, and then everybody started saying, well, this is what we need to do. Well, instead of saying what we need to do, let's come together and collectively work. Let's go back to this village mentality and not work in silos and not say, where is this organization? Where is that organization? But let's do a clarion call and say, let's get together, and what are we going to do, and be strategic for our community. Because everything we need, the black community holds to fix whatever's going on in the community.
Absolutely. Mr. Miles, where do we go?
roll up our sleeves and go to work.
Absolutely.
Let's go to work. Let's do the work. Let's stop talking about it and let's do the work. Let's put our egos aside. Let's swallow our pride, and let's admit that we don't have all of the answers and be willing and open to ask for help. And then do the work. As leaders and people in influence, as churches, and as parents and families, let's be honest and say we don't have all of the answers. It's okay to not have all of the answers, but it's not okay to not do anything. So let's go to work.
Very good. Thank you all so much. We appreciate your time and your sacrifice and being here with us this morning. I would tell the house to give you a round of applause, but ain't nobody here. So even in your homes, I'm sure they are giving you kudos and celebrating you all. Bishop, we're back in your hands, sir.